This is Mark's watching for Making the Cut. Last week, USA Basketball announced that Grant Hill will take over for Jerry Colangelo running the USA men's basketball program. Now, most people think this is a great hire, and on probably many levels, it is a good hire. But Grant Hill is walking into what could be an ambush. Let me explain. When Jerry Colangelo took over USA Basketball after a couple of disappointing performances, the big thing about USA Basketball that needed to be fixed was processes. You wanted to have multiple tournament commitments. You wanted to get the better players. And once you got buy-in from guys like LeBron and Kobe and Carmelo Anthony, not that the job became simple, but the job certainly was easier because the processes to how you select the teams, how you did team building, and how the commitments worked out were fixed. Grant Hill's problem is much worse than that. And all you have to do is look at your history books. We're about to enter an age of international basketball that we saw back in the mid 80s, which is America thinks that they're number one, but in reality, we don't know if they are or not. If you look back to the 1980s, you would see that in 1983, the World University Games, the United States ended up with a bronze medal. What misleads people is the 1984 Olympic team, which won a boycotted Olympics where the best European teams were not present. Yugoslavia was not present. Russia was not present. We always talk about the Russians, but the Yugoslavians were also a pain in the rear end. And you could argue in that time that the Yugoslavians were better than the Russians. Bobby Knight's team, even though it has future Hall of Famers on it, they never played a team like that. Now you can say, well, in Los Angeles, they might have won anyway, or they would have won anyway. It doesn't matter. We don't know if they win anyway. They beat a bunch of second-tier international teams to win that 84 gold. On 1985 University Games, that was coached by Lee Rose, silver. That had guys like Derek Chivas, Ron Harper, and Chuck Person. By the way, that 83 bronze team and the University Games was coached by Norm Stewart and had Charles Barkley, Johnny Dawkins, Karl Malone on it. We're not talking about a bunch of plumbers here. We all should remember the 1986 Goodwill Games when Lute Olson took a team that was not thought of to do much, and he won gold at the Goodwill Games. He had Tommy Amaker, Sean Elliott, David Robinson, Kenny Smith on that team. But that team really wasn't predicted to do a whole bunch, right? After that, 1987, silver medal. That had Coach K, Sean Elliott, Danny Ferry, Mitch Richmond. They lost to Yugoslavia. 1999, Goodwill's Games after the Olympics, where people wanted to blame John Thompson for ruining USA basketball and not winning the Olympics. They brought Coach Krzyzewski back, where he lost yet again to Yugoslavia with a team that had Kenny Anderson, Todd Day, Alonzo Mourning on it. So, first of all, we gotta, when we talk about Coach Krzyzewski and USA basketball, people tend to forget there was a Coach Krzyzewski USA basketball before the NBA players. He didn't win gold either. As much as we want to blame John Thompson, Coach Krzyzewski was not the guy who rode in on a white horse and saved USA basketball. He lost in 87 before Thompson lost in 88, and then he lost in 90 after Thompson lost in 88. Why do I bring all this up? Because Grant Hill is going to have to oversee USA basketball in a similar situation where it's not a talent void. It is not a process problem. It is the world has caught up problem. International basketball now has plenty of NBA players to be able to compete with USA basketball. We saw that in the World Cup, and I know in the FIBA World Cup, USA basketball didn't have the frontline NBA players. But that just shows you how much the game has changed, because there were times USA basketball wasn't competitive. They were not competitive. So it was beyond, we didn't have our best players and we just lost. They were getting, in large spurts, they were getting dominated. So how do you fix it? How do you fix something where it's not the talent void? It is the idea that the other side has just as much as not more talent. In a space where what's going to happen is we're about to see the LeBron era in international basketball. Everybody part of that era. If you do play one more Olympics, it's only one. Steph Curry, I think, has expressed interest playing. This would be his last. So you have to look beyond that. What is the next group coming up of USA basketball players? And can they compete not only with the next generation international players, but the international players who have 2 and 3 Olympics left in them? When you look at it on there, the United States is in trouble. We are in trouble because there is going to be a gap before we can reload, where the international teams aren't the ones that need to reload. The international teams will have players who play in the NBA. The international teams will have players who played in college. The international teams will have players who've been playing professional basketball since they were 18. They're going to have all of those things. So we need to look at the next generation of USA basketball and need to determine, is this a process? Is this we can't get players to play? Or more dangerously, are we back to the mid to late 90s where the problem is those other teams are just better? That's what Grant Hill is up against. And that's why I say he has a much harder job than Jerry Colangelo had.